Okay, so is everyone in the party in now?
Looks like it. We have 8 on track, 8 in the party.
Yeah. You guys want to do a race in this thing? Just a fun race and then we'll go back into a practice like this with the suspension. And then everyone can have some time to work on suspension tuning. Yeah, we'll do like a post-race debrief, and then we'll talk about what we can adjust and what we should expect. You know, I think the best way to do it is, you know, try and understand how the car is handling in its current state, and what we need to do with the adjustments to fix some of the fill handling issues it has. Like, you can tell that it transfers a lot of weight front to back, and in the braking zones it transfers so much weight to the front that you get a really unstable rear, which is actually kind of common in most like stock cars that aren't like really set up for performance. Like, if you're heavily braking and you turn, you're going to get oversteer, and a lot of cars straight from the factory that are not really configured for handling. Like something like an S2000, like you take a stock S2000 on a track and you like brake full force and turn in, it's probably going to oversteer. Because moving weight to the front, removing weight from the rear, and so you're adding grip to the front and losing grip on the rear. And that's why these cars are so unstable in the braking zone. It's like, it's most, yeah, that's basically it. It's the weight being, yeah, the weight distribution is a factor too. On this car, it's like 57 front, I think. So it's front heavy on top of that, and it's a heavier car, 3,400 pounds. So like you can feel it. Like if you're on a wheel, you can feel the car like squirming in the brake, even though you're trying to brake straight. Yeah, it seems like it throws a lot of weight to the front in braking, but then that weight doesn't transfer back to the rear as well. It's like it has, I mean, it does. If you look at the setting sheet, it has a pretty stiff rear setting compared to the front. It's stiffer in the rear than the front by the default. Yes. And that's like one of the things that is hard to, I guess, translate in like video games and Sims, because it's subtle to the eyes to see the car like pitching depending on what view you use. Like if you use bumper cam, you don't even really see it. But like normally we call it like a recovery period. Like there's a period between full braking and turn in where you have to be coming off the brakes to let the suspension recover before you turn into the corner. And if you don't do that, you get oversteer. So that's, you basically have the front loaded when you turn in, I'll do it right now. I'm still on the brakes. I turn in, it snaps immediately. So if you're driving like a stock car, you have to think of it like teetering the car back and forth on its, center of gravity and transferring that weight. And the only way you can transfer that weight in the braking zone is by lifting off the brakes. So there's a period as you're turning in or just before turning where you're actually coming off the brakes to stabilize the car at turn-in. So you kind of have to over-slow a little bit, or slow more than you need to. And that's like one of those big things about braking early. Like if I brake early and I turn in completely off the brakes, but at a low speed, it understeers. And that's kind of one of those other things with suspension tuning where, depending on your driving style, you may experience more understeer versus oversteer. If you're braking earlier, you might not notice the oversteer on entry like someone else does. And also, like with the wheel especially, I can, like the last corner, I can turn in really aggressively and get oversteer, but if I turn in gently, it'll understeer. So like if you practice like turn one, if you brake a little earlier, completely lift off the brakes before you start turning in, the car should be much more stable on entry and not have the big rear stepping out. And so you can use that to get the car to rotate by trail braking a little bit if you want to. Alright, so is everyone ready to, we'll do a little race.
Yeah, what is it, 5 laps or so?
Yeah, like 5 laps.
Nice.
Yep, sport hard. Is everyone ready?
Yep.
Think it's a grid start? Honestly, don't remember. If not, that's okay. This thing with cold tires is even worse. just see you on the map like spinning in circles like Mario Kart. I didn't even realize I had 9. This thing will bite you so fast. Like you get used to driving it, but then you forget that it's like a death trap. Yeah, I think it's an issue of the suspension, the body roll and everything gets to such a limit that it's really unstable. Like it basically comes down to how much body roll it has, and it like has to, once the traction breaks loose, like the weight transfer changes because the rear steps out and the body roll shifts back the other way, and it just is almost like it's not gradual. So we've got a baseline at least. It has a lot of body roll. I think we all agree that. It has a lot of weight transfer. So probably the main thing we'll try and focus on is reducing that weight transfer in a way that still keeps the car stable and predictable, which isn't really easy, but I think one important thing to point out with like all cars in this game is the suspension. Like when you buy like the fully adjustable suspension, it has like a default setup, right? But the cars also can have wings on them. They can have different tires, different tire compounds, and so a differential, different gearing. So that default setup you get isn't really, a one-size-fits-all, option. So it's very generalized. So if you do weight reduction, it's going to handle differently with that setup than leaving all the weight in. So we have to understand how to tweak that. And so now we can all switch our car settings, and we'll put on the fully customizable suspension. You can start with the defaults, and first we'll kind of look at it here for a second and compare it to the stock. So stock, it has 125 millimeter front rear ride height, level 1 roll bars, dampening damping ratios and compression expansion. They're pretty standard, 25, 25, 35, 30. Then you have 150 or 1.5 hertz natural frequency in the front, but 1.65 in the rear, which would tell me the rear is stiffer than the front. And then it has more camber in the rear than the front, and it has toe-in the rear, which is what you'd expect. So the car gets a little bit lower with the fully customizable suspension. The roll bars are stiffened. the damping ratios are upped a little bit, and everything is like increased just a little bit. You know, the natural frequency is upped on both, still higher in the rear than the front, and then you've got -3 degrees of camber all the way around, and the toe stayed the same. So I'm gonna drive it just with that default setup for now, and try and like compare that to where it was in the beginning. I'm assuming it's stiffer all around, but we'll see if it handles the same or it's better, worse, easier to control. Yep, I see someone's already in the wall, so already under braking it feels. There's another person in the wall. It is slidey though. It's still, I mean, that's the tires though. So we're not gonna. Oh no, I just. So it's stiffer, and I feel like it's actually on throttle more unstable than what it. I think in the braking zone it's better, but the compromise is it's still not transferring weight to the rear. It's transferring less weight to the front under braking, which is good, but it's not transferring weight to the rear on acceleration. So yeah, the car much more stable in the braking. It understeers more, but yeah, as soon as you get on the throttle, it's really sketchy. So now we've got a car that feels better everywhere except on throttle. At least that's my first lap impression. Still unstable in turn 1 if you try and trail brake, but. So in a lot of ways it feels harder to drive because of the on-throttle snappiness. But yeah, it improved the braking. Before it was kind of the same everywhere. It had the same kind of tendency to oversteer under braking or on throttle, and they felt kind of at least similar to each other to where you could predict it. And now it feels much better on the entry to the corner. And as soon as you start touching the throttle, it's just way more aggressive on breakaway. So my first thought is to soften the rear, because I want more weight to transfer to the rear tires. Yeah, the frequency. So I usually start with, that's a much bigger factor. It's basically your spring rate. It is. It is on stock and in default, which, like on most front engine rear wheel drive cars, that's not what you would. That's not what you would see. Especially since this has 57% front weight balance, 43 rear. So we have more weight in the front than the rear, but we have a higher natural frequency in the rear than the front. And it feels that way. It feels really stiff in the rear. really snappy on throttle. Like, generally on throttle, you want, you know, the car to pitch up, like it's a squat, right? And put weight to the rear. So I'm just gonna, like, sometimes I start by doing a big change. I'm just gonna put it like, we'll say 165. So it's totally different now. And I'm leaving everything else the same. I just want to see if that one change is like enough to notice a difference. Yep. I think generally, you know, obviously those two complement each other, but initially I want it to be a, you know, the suspension to do the best job it can, and then you kind of use the diff to fine-tune that. Yeah, you can definitely improve with the diff, and what you'll end up doing is, like, you'll get to where you'll feel the car like over rev, where it's like a clutch slipping feeling when it's like too open. It'll be more stable, but it won't put power down. So, but I put it at 165 for now, and I didn't change anything else. I just wanted to see if softening the rear. Yeah, it's a massive difference. It changed the back. You know, it's changing to where it's softer in the rear than the front, where it was the opposite before. So I feel the car more unstable in the rear and moving around more. Right. So that's our next tool in the toolbox, is if the rear feels like it's. But the interesting thing is that the car has a little more oversteer for me now, but it's more gradual when it breaks away. Kind of back closer to, it makes sense because it's kind of closer to how it felt with the stock suspension, which was softer, where you have that. But the braking stability is still better than stock. But it's still kind of unstable, and it's back to having like too much weight transfer left to right will unsettle the rear, which is what kind of the sway bars help, you know, with. They help the left to right weight distribution, and the spring rate is more for your front to rear.
Doing is I actually stiffened the front, so the difference between the spring rates is actually the same, but the front is harder instead of softening the rear, and it's a completely different feel.
Yeah, that's kind of, yeah, you can go either direction, right? You can, let me just reset my setting sheet here.
Right, and it's based on what you need the car to do, based on the track, of course. But so far, I'm liking this.
So it was 205, so I'll put it up to 205, and what did you put the front at?
2.6?
2.6, so pretty stiff, but
yeah.
But that's gonna like really improve front, reduce that front nose pitch, reduce the front weight transfer.
Yeah, it feels much better in turn 3 especially.
We can work on anything we want. So, has anyone found a setup that they think works pretty well, or something they found that helped improve it? What to play with? Alright, so in this game, as far as I'm aware, I know that adjusting the front and rear ride height does have an effect on the aerodynamic balance. So if the front is lower, you tend to get more downforce on the front. But if you go too low, you'll feel the suspension bottom out. So like when you go over the curbs, like in 10A, 10B, like the final chicane, you'll feel the car get really unstable over those if the car's too low. You don't have enough suspension travel. So with the ride height, you basically want to get it as low as possible without the car being unstable over curbs and bumps and things like that. And you can use it to balance downforce to try and add a little more grip to the front or the rear, and the way weight transfers, because obviously if the car is raked forward, it's going to transfer more weight forward. And then the roll bars, which is the second option, that's going to help improve the stability of the car when you transition, like turning left to right. Like in the S's, if you go left and then you turn right, and the car, tends to oversteer and become unstable as the weight transfers there, stiffening the roll bars will reduce that body roll and make the car more stable. In left to right transitions, or less body roll in the corners, and you can use that to tweak the balance of the car. Like if you stiffen the front and have a softer rear, it'll tend to understeer more. If you have a stiffer rear anti-roll bar and a softer front one, you'll get more oversteer. So you can use those in a way with combined with the suspension natural frequency to get the way the weight transfers front to back, left to right balanced. So think of the roll bars as balancing the weight left to right, and the natural frequency is balancing the weight front to rear. And you use those kind of together. And then I feel like the camber angle helps, but it's not as critical, as well as the toe in the rear is what you want to help keep it more stable if it oversteers. But on like a front wheel drive car, you'd want toe out in the rear, because if you want more rotation. So let me try my Yeah, on some cars it's really bad where the wheel will be tucked in the wheel well and it'll get stuck and the car won't turn. Like the Amuse S2000 is like really bad about it. You lower the car all the way, it won't turn. And I tested it because like at Spa, like going through Eau Rouge and Raidillon, it will bottom out and the wheel will like get stuck in the wheel well temporarily and you'll become unstable. But if you're just sitting the car on the ground level or taking kind of normal corners, you won't see it. Like it'll be fine. It's only when the car gets compressed, goes under compression, that the wheel will get stuck. So that can affect cars in random areas where you don't realize it. So in a second, I'm gonna do a quick test lap, and then we can maybe share some of our settings and just see how people have it set up. You can create a new setting sheet, or not a duplicate, but just a new one, and then yeah, that works too. natural frequency, spring rate, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, if you feel like you are much more in control on throttle, then you can get by with, you know, running stiffer rear suspension. Or if you like to brake really late and throw the car in, like trail brake really heavily, then you're going to want it more set up for turn in and straight line braking stability, which would be a stiffer front anti-roll bar, and a lot of understeer. Like, I set it up now, it feels worse. It actually understeers more, but it's not slow. And on throttle, it's much more manageable. So I have a whole lot of understeer, but it's not like, it's stable under braking, and the oversteer is controllable. I don't know if this will actually be a better setup. Does anyone want some suggestions of settings to... Well, first you have to say kind of what you're experiencing with the car, or what you feel like is the biggest problem, if it's the braking instability or the throttle oversteer. Well, it's kind of, you have kind of two directions, right? You have unfortunately, it's always about compromise. So, like, you can remove front grip to get a more stable rear by making the front lose grip first. But if you do that too much, that's what creates kind of that snap oversteer feel where, and that's how like a lot of the GT3 cars are set up in this game. It's like they have a whole lot of understeer. So if you get wheel spin, it's like really snappy because you have so much more rear grip than front grip. Anytime you actually get oversteer, it's like usually from wheel spin, and it's dramatic instead of like a gradual loss of like rear grip. So if you feel like really snappy loss of grip, it's usually because there's a lot of rear grip and not enough front grip. And one way to kind of test it is like if you're mid-corner and you're off throttle, like on the longer sweeping corners, if the car's still understeering, it means that it's probably could be a little bit stiffer in the rear or softer in the front. Because you kind of want the car like mid-corner to rotate, you know, evenly, like go back to slide a little bit, and the front to still want to turn in. Toasty's running some quick laps.
Yeah, I was about to share the numbers I'm using for the suspension. Try and explain it a little bit the best I can.
Yeah, if you can explain like what you feel like your reasoning, or if it's just I did random stuff, then that's fine too. But if you have like a logic behind it, that'll help people, I think.
Yeah, so I dropped the body height to 85. I feel like that's a good value just for, like Hubble was talking about, the lowest it can go without causing problems. And then front anti-roll bar I put up to 6. Just to stabilize the front a bit more. The front losing grip before the rear, basically, like we were referring to. And then the rear anti-roll bar I put all the way down to 2. So yeah, quite extreme changes, but it was really helping with stability on turn-in.
Yeah, that stability of the understeer, the tight front, soft compliant rear.
Yep. I did do a bit of work with the dampers, like a more word I'm looking for, impactful, I guess, is the natural frequency. I put the front to 2.7 and the rear to 2.15, so stiffen the rear a little bit actually, but
really stiff front.
Yeah. Camber I left the same at 3 and then gave it to Wayne. A little bit, so I got 35 and 25 on compression, and then 38 and 40 on expansion. And honestly, the damping ratios, like I just refer to a picture I have that just kind of tells me like which way they go, how it influences. Because I've always had trouble wrapping my head around the dampers. I can't seem to understand like how they work in the car, but.
Well, compression is basically resisting compression, resisting the spring compressing together, so trying to keep it from pressing into the ground, the weight pushing on it. And rebound is actually resisting moving away from the ground, so the stiffer they are, the slower they're going to move. If you go too stiff, which the weird thing about this game is you don't have that much rebound and damping like adjustment for like how stiff the springs can get. I feel like it already starts pretty high, and the spring rate, like stiffness, can go like way higher.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm not really sure like if they allow you to. I don't think you can even like over damp the car to where like you actually like stop suspension from moving.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I haven't really played with like full stiff, but like, you know, in theory, full stiff would be like the suspension wouldn't move. It would just be like a solid block.
Right.
Like that's the infinite, you know, adjustment if it was available. And then the lowest adjustment is like it bounces on the spring like a pogo stick, you know.
Right. It just never stops oscillating.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess it makes sense to have the front compression, damping ratio compression higher, like 10 higher than the rear.
Yeah, like in the rear, I generally want it to like really want to like fall back on the rear when I accelerate, right? Like I want those weights to really want to go back easily, so I would make that like a little bit lower compression, so that it will be willing to move.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, it should. It should
bring
with
a bit harder
the
into
really
the
stiff
corners.
front. The really stiff front and softer rear should overall stabilize the car a lot. And what you're actually doing is well, I wouldn't say you're necessarily limiting front grip, but you are taking away maybe a slight bit of like theoretical, like maximum front grip. Or what the real problem is you just have more, you have an unbalance of grip on the car to begin with, so even though theoretically the car may have like more grip in the front or the rear in like ideal setup, it may just be terrible to drive or unstable to drive in that configuration. So like imagine a car with like only, like if you put a rear wing on it and put like max rear downforce and then you don't put anything on the front, it's just going to understeer really bad. Right? It's just not going to want to turn because it's going to have all this rear grip. It'll feel like it just can't turn. Now you could change leave the wing on and do everything in the setup to try to make the car oversteer, but it's really going to be difficult to drive when you get it to that point. Because all you're doing is like removing grip from the rear to try to get the car more balanced, when really the solution is to like take the wing off or add more front downforce. So kind of what we're doing today is like really limited, because like you would also want to, you know, the next complexity is complementing this with like downforce adjustments and differential adjustments and ballast, moving it, adding ballast and then moving it to different parts of the car, front to rear. That can help. I think I'd like to do a differential one in a front-wheel drive car, because I feel like the front-wheel drive cars, it's much easier to see it like that it actually works, where it actually like will help the car turn, where it's harder to see in the rear-wheel drive cars on a lot of them. Yeah, the Civic Type R is terrible. It's terrible with the stock diff, and if you add an adjustable one, it like totally transforms the car. We'll do the 2020, the Nürburgring Challenge one, which is like a nightmare to drive. I don't even know if it's possible on controller. It's like so hard to drive. Like I had to like purposely like just turn the wheel even more than what you normally would want to like scrub the front and understeer. Yeah, I watched the real life lap and was like, hey, the car's like oversteering, you know, on like the first corner. Like that is not what's happening in the game. So I did one where I just tuned it in the game, like on my own, like in a time trial, and played with the diff and tried to do minimal adjustments. I didn't want to like go too crazy. I was just like, can I get one to kind of handle like what that one was handling, like, you know, like with more oversteer, less steering angle everywhere, and you can do it. Like it can handle that way. Alright, my car, it took a few laps, but I ran a decent lap. It's still unstable under braking, but I feel like it's more balanced. I may still have to do some adjusting.
Yeah, the first lap I did in the car when it was on the stock suspension, the first thing I thought of was turning up the braking sensitivity on the diff, like all the way up. But of course we're not using the differential, so
right.
This has been interesting to figure out how to do the same kind of thing with suspension. I'd never really tried it in that order.
Yeah, so all the adjustments kind of overlap, right? Like I said, like if we could just play with wings, like we'll do one where we just do downforce. We'll start with a car without arrow, we'll do a front arrow, rear arrow, and then play with the balance of those arrows to like make the car oversteer, make the car understeer. The arrow is much more powerful for fine tuning. But again, like it's good to know how to do it kind of with everything, because you may have certain, like at low speeds, you need to know how to do suspension tuning, right? Because the arrow's not as effective, so you need to know kind of, oh, the car is bottoming out, or the suspension's too stiff over these curves.
Yeah, what I found in this game, it's basically low, mid, and high speed is low speed suspension tuning, mid speed differential, and high speed downforce. It's basically what I've kind of divided it into, like what makes the most impact in each area.
Yeah, and I think I think the differential, like I said, it matters a lot more in like the front wheel drive cars.
Yeah.
And yeah. Yeah, and I don't know what they do, because it feels like the stock differential, even though it, like I said, it has numbers there of like the levels, it doesn't feel the same as like the fully customized or like the two-way. So, and you get like that like inside wheel spin with a lot of horsepower, where it's like the clutch is slipping. It's like the inside wheel, one wheel is literally just like spinning in a straight line. Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you one thing that like I haven't seen in a sim that I noticed in real life with my Miata. I had the like stock Bilstein shocks and like some just ground control springs on it. It was kind of a cheap suspension setup, and it has a torsion differential, like the stock. The stock torsion. Yeah, that's the stock like sport Miata differential. But it would, anytime I went over a curb, like an inside curb, you would get wheel spin. Like on like one of the tighter corners, it would just wheel spin if you touch the inside curb. So you'd have to avoid the inside curbs. And then I drove one of my friend's cars that had Olin shocks and springs on it, like Olin coilovers. And when you hit curbs in that car, when I first drove it, I was like, did I even touch the curb? Like, you couldn't even feel, like the suspension was so smooth. So I was like, okay, I've got to spend a ton of money on the Olins. And the biggest difference in my car, like it made my car faster because I could then hit the curbs and it had no wheel spin. Like they were so compliant with the dampening and everything that the wheel spin just went away. Like that inside rev up wheel spin disappeared. And so it's like, right. It was just being more compliant, and the shocks were, damping actually correctly. I mean, they have adjustable dampers so you can play with it, single adjustable, but it was such a, I guess, something I never thought of, right? That like I could improve my differentials performance with shocks and springs instead of like buying a better diff, because I could have bought like an OS Gaikin or something, but it feels like I don't have any problems with the diff, so there's no reason to upgrade it because I upgraded the suspension instead.
But do you think what was happening before was the compression on the suspension was too stiff, and it was kind of creating like this wheel hop where the wheel would spin in the air and then come back down? And
yeah, it's like the damping is set one way and it's really stiff, where it wasn't paired to the springs and it wasn't adjustable. And so when you hit the curb, the wheel comes off the ground, starts to wheel spin, and then once it starts to wheel spin, it has enough time, that like brief moment of it lifting and starting to spin, loses traction, and then you've got to come out of it to get back in the traction, where it was just never having like that shock. Like it's really high speed damping, because you have low speed damping and high speed damping. Low speed damping feels kind of the same, easy little bumps and stuff, but when you hit like that hard bump, that's where the car felt smoother. Like hitting a curb, like the inside curb, it wouldn't like bounce, it just would quickly, it could handle that high speed change in suspension and then stop it at the right moment. Where the cheaper, just factory Bilsteins, I mean, they're nice shocks, but they were really good at low speed, but they had no like good high speed control. It's like they only had kind of like one mode of damping, where the Öhlins are made to work in low speed changes and suspension rate and high speed changes, and that's something that like I don't see in any like game or sim like really done in the way I've like experienced it. But anyway, yeah, I softened the rear more and the car feels better, so
Nice.
it's still stiffer than the original. I've got it to where it actually feels like it kind of turns in well too. Let me do a lap and then we can do another race. This is kind of like not a very well structured practice, but it's more about just kind of testing tune, I guess. Yeah, I mean, you can save the sheets, but yeah, you still have to go to the pits and like pause. Or yeah, you have to back out, right? I don't think you can pause.
Like you press the options button while you're in the pits, and then just comes up with a tuning menu. You can press like, that'd be nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I was struggling Monday night when we were doing the K cars, and it's like we're going to dirt, and we're going to the oval, and I'm like desperately trying to like make a tune. But then it's like if you forgot to switch tunes when you went to the next race, so you have some weird tune on the car. I think he does a decent job, but like I said, I think it's more important to kind of understand what works for your driving style more than just like. I think he's good at like doing tunes that will work really well for like the PP limits of races and stuff like that, but that might not necessarily be like a fun to drive car. It may just be a technically, fast car, because I think he benchmarks them mostly off like how fast they can do like the single player races and stuff like that.
Right, which means it's a setup where they're not driving around other cars very often.
Right.
You also need a car that's stable enough where you can take an outside line if you need to.
Which now in like sport mode they're opening up more tuning options, so it'll be interesting to see how much they actually give people to play with. Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of cars don't have good setups because, one, they're trying to like make it easy to drive for a controller player, and also, like I said, you start modifying the car, and whatever the default setting was doesn't really work for the mods that well. So. I mean, it's a hard thing to balance out, so you're going to end up with cars that just don't handle well, and if you don't know how to kind of understand why it's handling badly, it's all just really balancing grip and the transition of weight.
Yeah, the very brief explanation I had for each one was pretty much all I had.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think that's pinned in the classroom channel.
And then you never know, like there could be something with like Toasty's driving style that makes that setting more comfortable for him, and maybe for other people it's, you know, they don't get the same, you know, feeling from it for whatever reason. Generally, if it's it depends. Is it a really quick oversteer or gradual? Yeah, that's generally like the rear being too stiff and it's not transferring weight. Since the car doesn't really have, you know, much downforce, the only way we're getting grip is from transferring, you know, weight to the rear. So if you're getting on the throttle and it's just instantly snapping, it means that the weight isn't transferring them backwards to kind of help put the tires into the ground, you know. Oh, you would go lower with natural frequency, and that'll be a softer spring. But that can also make the car unstable by having like too much body roll in the rear. To balance that, you'll use the front and rear anti-roll bar settings to try and keep the body roll management. And yeah, soften. And yeah, you want them kind of a little bit stiffer than like the default. I think it's at 4 from default, so you ideally probably want the front a little stiffer than the rear. But basically you want them low enough to where, you know, the car feels stable, but like if it loses grip, you'll kind of feel it like moving around more. Like, you know, the lower you go, the more the car will have body roll left to right. Like, the more it'll lean weight to the left side or the right side. And kind of the interesting thing about that is it'll matter more, a lot more like when you're transitioning left to right, where you're throwing the weight from one side to the other, than like single corners. So you may be able to run like softer anti-roll bars on some tracks where you're not transitioning as much, and then you may need stiffer ones on tracks where there's like a lot of left-right transitions. you want that like quick response of the car's weight transferring. So that's probably because there's too much weight going to the front of the car. And part of that can also be driving, because, you know, the car is still heavy and on hard sport tires, so part of it could be trying to brake a little bit earlier and be coming off the brakes a little earlier as you turn in. You can try that to try and mitigate the oversteer on entry. But the other thing is just really stiff front springs, so the natural frequency really high in the front compared to the rear, and even a little bit more toe in the rear, but I wouldn't go too crazy with that. Yeah. Is anyone still struggling with it, or? Like I said, that can be a combination of how you're braking, and just like even me, like my car feels pretty good on entry, but if I brake a little too late and try and turn in, it's gonna still oversteer. And again, that would probably be eventually fixed with a diff and aero, like front and rear wing. Because the aero is going to be a big aid in reducing weight transfer, because the rear wing keeps the rear planted in the braking zone. And that's how you like really get the trail brake deep in the corners, is with downforce. You can't really get the car there without downforce. Oh gosh. So when people talk about trail braking, I always think it's kind of like not great that it's always talked about in like racing, like I'll learn to trail brake, because if you're not driving a car with like really good downforce, then trail braking does what you're experiencing with this car, like snap oversteer. Like braking and trying to turn, and this car is like death. And there's nothing we can, there's nothing we can really do to fix it without reducing the weight transfer significantly. But if we stiffen the springs so much that it doesn't weight transfer anymore, it's not going to handle well. So what it really needs is either less weight or more downforce to press the rear into the ground and prevent the weight from transferring. So what were you saying?
I'd be interested to see, like, take the same tune and put sport soft tires on it and see like how different it is.
Oh yeah.
Just the tires.
All right, so you guys want to throw on some, like, let's do maybe the sport medium tires, and we'll do a race, and we'll see. See if the tire grip plus the tuning set, or we can stick with what we've got. It's up to you guys. If you'd like to race on the current setup you've been practicing on, or I have them disabled right now, so. I haven't been able to rep. Well, basically what happens is anytime, well, one, the curbs and things like that will be undrivable because the car won't handle over curbs easily. And yeah, it's like super flat. Well, I guess the main problem is, like, say you have 3 degrees of negative camber, now your tire isn't contacting the road because the car isn't actually, like, rolling over onto that camber angle. You know, you're not letting the suspension geometry give any to where you actually have body roll and you have weight transfer to that in that contact patch moving. So okay, then you put your tires straight or have less camber in the car, and I mean, I guess it'd kind of be okay, but the problem is, like, you want more weight transfer to the outside of the car in the corner. It actually adds grip to those tires, you know, because they're being pressed into the surface from the weight. Yeah, so if you stiffen it, you're not transferring your weight, so you're not loading the tires that need the grip when they need it. So weight transfer is good to a certain extent to actually press the tires into the track and increase that, you know, level of grip. But that's why go-karts are, like, just so skittish. And actually, like, a weird thing about go-karts is you'll see the really fast people, they'll lean out. Like, they'll lean out when they go into a turn. Like, you'll see them actually shift their weight to the outside of the car to put more weight on the tires with grip. Like,
right.
Yeah. Where you think lean into the corner, right, to, like, prevent weight transfer. But, like, the fast go-kart guys, like, on, like, the SODI karts, you can go to, like, the, you know, local go-kart tracks. If you lean back away from the corner, you know, onto that, like, back rear tire, like, it'll have so much more grip, and the back end won't step out because you're putting all your weight, you're pressing it into the ground. And, like, everything in your head tells you, like, that shouldn't make sense. Like, you want to put the weight to the inside and resist, like, body roll, right? But no, it's all a balance, you know. It's all right. We all ready? You want to do another? We'll do this race, and then we can do, like, one more fun race where we can just do softer tires and actually make a car that handles well. All right.
An Easter egg bibendum? Pokemon Snap that.
Oh, sorry, I started us. If you didn't want it, I should have asked. I think everyone got off the line way better this time. But how's the turn one braking? Pretty good. Sun. I should have set the time settings differently. It's like reflecting off everybody's car, right, in turn 5. That's alright. I turned and then looked at my radar right as I turned, and I was like, oh shit. Yeah, if you could put like they do in like a set of Corsa and put it right in the middle. Ooh. Shortcut, Hippo. I didn't put penalties on, so it's legal. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to bump you. I don't know if I did bump you. In my screen, I bumped you. Just like very gently, so... keep battling up there. Go for it, Toasty.
I was like, if
I just get it on the inside, maybe I'll have a chance to like nose it in. But it just spun on the inside curve immediately. Yeah.
Nice one, Alan.
Alright. So anyone got any more questions for everyone, or how about if you want to do one more, we can do soft tires and maybe it won't be such a like such a terrible car to drive. Wait, what? It can't initialize? What does that mean? Oh. Okay. Should be able to switch tires now, so softs allowed. The interesting thing is, you may have to buy them, I guess.
The performance points also has to be reached.
Oh gosh, yeah.
I'm at 586.4.
I made it too complicated. Hang on a second. Yeah, we'll just put no limit. That should fix it. So it's not so blinding? Alright, yeah, that's part of the challenge, right? Sometimes it's hard to see. No, yeah, you can go ahead and change to sport softs now if you want. And it, Oh, like the front windshield? Oh. Alright, is everyone ready? No practice. Wait, do you want? Yeah, no practice. Do we want to change the starting grid? Let me adjust it. It's random. Chad Trill said he didn't like being pole. Who won? Alan? No, okay. Alright, good luck everybody. See how the tires affect our handling. If it's just... These aren't that dramatic, so it should just be better, hopefully. But sometimes the more grip can make the car transfer weight differently. You know, like in braking, if you have more grip, it's going to transfer more weight to the front, and it might become more unstable in the braking if you didn't, you know, adjust the braking stability. Yeah, that too. Well, it's like I see a lot of people, they'll put like race tires on a stock car and then complain about its handling. And it's like, yeah, because like it transfers all the weight onto the front tires, so there's so much grip and then it spins. Ooh.
Oh no.
Oh my god, this turn-in is so much more responsive. So I guess at the end of this, I'm hoping we can say, okay, we added a little bit better tire, which it needed anyway, but does this thing actually handle decently now? I mean, we didn't really, like, put on a master class. Like, I wasn't really prepared to, like, I guess, structure it, but hopefully we can, like, document some of this in the classroom section on the Discord for everybody.
Yeah.
And, this video will be on my YouTube. Maybe I can, like, edit it and cut it down and... Oh my...
Oh no!
Someone just got killed. He spun like straight into the inside concrete wall. Oh yeah, this thing feels actually like a fun car to drive now. With these tires you can kind of throw it around. You know, it's really sensitive on the hards, but it's like night and day just with like the soft. Like it'll still like slide out a little, but yeah, you can recover from it. It's not like that. I'm sorry. I oversped you on the back straightaway, so you weren't ready for the... I gave you like an extra speed boost.
boost that applied to more than just one car.
Well, I braked early because I knew we were both going like faster, and then you have to brake so early in this car, you like see it in slow motion. I was like, uh-oh. He didn't stop him. I guess we should have started with the car on softs. It'd been interesting. Oh, everyone's losing it. We should have started on softs. I wonder how bad it is on softs with the stock suspension. If it's still like really undrivable or not. Now it just needs brakes.
Yeah, I think it would actually be a little worse on the sports hards with racing brakes, because then the weight transfer would just be like compounded.
Yeah, you get the... Well, even now, like, you know, it's stuff you have to consider, like, if we put better brakes on the car, it may transfer weight more, and we'll have to, we'll have to readjust the suspension to recompensate for that. But right now, besides that it takes it a long time to brake, it's flying over the curves, it turns in well, it's just getting it slowed down. Feels like it has plenty of rear grip now. Yeah, it's like a huge difference with the tire delta on this. Yep. Did you just take his name in just take his name in vain? Yeah, the Babindum. No, that's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. That's different. No, I mean, I don't know where Babindum comes from, but he's been around a long time. Yeah, I've got a vintage poster of the Babindum. I'll have to post it on the Discord. It's, yeah, weird looking.
Was it Dinosaur who ended up having like an AI generated art referenced on like a famous? That was so funny.
All right. Alright, any closing comments or takeaways or things people felt like they learned today? Right, the important thing is kind of understanding what's happening, right? It's like understanding kind of what you want to achieve, and it's really just physics and the balance of the, oh yeah, there's graffiti. Graffiti up here. Some kind of vandalism. Yeah, next one I'd like to do focus on the front wheel drive cars and the differential. And we'll probably do the 2020 Civic because stock, its differential is garbage, and if you mod it, it turns like it's a rear-wheel drive car. Yeah, it's the newest one that they just added, so I think we'll use that, and I don't know what track, but we'll do diff, and we'll go ahead and add like suspension. So we'll keep the thing from the week before, so if you want to play with it, you can, and then add the differential on top. So it'll get more complicated as we go along with like tuning cars, but that's kind of how it works, right? You add it all together, it's overwhelming, but if we do it bit by bit, it should be a little bit easier for people to understand. Yeah, I think those are good places to start because that's going to make the biggest changes in handling. Like the natural frequency is going to change the weight transfer front to rear a lot, from basically almost none to max, with the softest spring versus the stiff. Because like almost on all these cars, the spring stiffness can go way higher than what you probably ever need. Because it's made to start with a stock car and go all the way to all the weight stripped out, 1,000 horsepower, full aero car.
Right, possibly with an engine swap.
Right, with possibly engine swap. So like certain cars may have even more ridiculous adjustability because of like its max limit, right? So in the natural frequency is kind of a good, I understand why they did it because it's kind of a universal measurement of spring rate, so it kind of eliminates the numbers and just goes with like an overall oscillation of the suspension.
Yeah.
Because so some cars the spring is really close to the wheel, and then some cars it's an inbound suspension, and those spring rates have to be amplified because of the extra torque on it. The inbound suspension has all this leverage against it, so the spring rates are like, it's called a motion ratio. So if a car has a motion ratio of 1, then a 1,000-pound spring is 1-to-1 with, it's right next to the tire, and it's taking, the 1,000-pound spring rate, it's taking the load at a, no multiplication. Now, if it's a motion ratio, I can't remember actually if the ratio, it's like 2-to-1 or whatever. If imagine the spring's like further inbound and there's a long arm to attach it to the wheel, now a 1,000-pound spring to have the same, like, suspension oscillation would have to be double. It'd have to be a 2,000-pound spring if it's moved further in. So using just spring rate doesn't make sense.
Right.
Because the natural frequency combines what the spring rate and the motion ratio give you as far as like the oscillation of the suspension. Which, if you change the suspension geometry of a car that had the same weight and tires and everything else, the natural frequency would remain constant. If it remained constant, then you'd have basically the same mechanical suspension feel. So that's why that's like the easier unit. Yeah, it's the actual output of the suspension geometry combined with a certain stiffness of spring. But on a lot of cars, people talk about spring rates, and it's not really like a translatable number completely. I mean, it's kind of close, but a Miata spring rate is different than like a Porsche 911 or something with like McPherson struts versus double wishbone suspension. So yeah, generally you want. I think there's actually a guide on like general spring rates, but it's like between like 1.5 and 2.5 hertz is like street car, and then like 2.5 to like and up is like modified road cars, and then when you get into like 4 and 5 hertz, that's like formula cars and like GT3 cars. Stiffer, yeah, because like you said, if the grip goes up, the weight transfer is more, you're able to transfer more weight before the tires lose traction. So like the extreme example of that is like whatever the light cars are that you can make them like pop a wheelie, when you like put race tires on them. So the stickier the tire, the more the weight transfers, all the way to the point to where some cars like pick wheels off the ground. So yeah, you're right. Like you would probably increase your spring rate if you're going to a race compound or a sport soft But then to counter that, when you add downforce to the car, that helps reduce the weight transfer by pressing, because it's a constant force on the rear of the car and the braking. So when you initially brake, you still have all that rear downforce from the rear wing preventing the rear from lifting. So that's what gives you a counter to at that spring rate, where you could maybe bring your spring rate down if you added a wing to the car. But it's all dependent. Right, yeah, you'll get that too. Yeah, because the car's ride height drops with downforce, so it does press the car down lower. Yeah, the rear's higher, yeah. Yeah, and then, if you haven't done weight reduction yet, and then you do weight reduction, then suddenly, you don't need as stiff of a spring. So, I mean, really, you want to probably get away with the lightest, lowest spring you can get away with feasibly, but that all comes down to like how the weight's transferring, and like you said, how the car's bottoming out, things like that. So. Yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's hard in the game anyway, because you don't have like the G-force feel, but the wheel helps a little bit, but yeah, it's not easy. It's just something you have to kind of mentally like think about. All right, yep, this will be the end. Thanks, guys.